I don't know if I'm going to do a video with this one, but I was thinking about it, so I figure I'd go ahead. The concept is really, how do you debate a socialist? And before I can start there, you have to start with what I would call the three rungs of most people on anything. And that's, you have the uninformed normie, the uninformed acolyte, and, not the expert, but the journeyman. Because most of us, there's of course experts in all fields, but most of us aren't experts in anything, but we're usually journeymen in one way or the other. But so you have your person who knows nothing, doesn't give a shit. You have your person who knows very little, but has chosen a side even though they don't know very much. And this goes for all sides, of course. And then you have the person who knows. And when you're dealing with, let's call him the expert. When you're dealing with the Marxist expert, you're dealing with someone who, what they really know is how to lie. And what they really know is how to manipulate. And what they really know is how to try to turn your own words against you. So if you're in a scenario where you are actually arguing with a person like this, the first thing you need to know is all of their terminology is basically made up. And what I mean by that is, yes, if you look up their terminology, communism, socialism, social democracy, democratic socialism, social democracy, all of it, they all have terms and they all mean something. None of them use those terms correctly 90% of the time. And as soon as you start to get a grasp on one, they will move on to the next one. And that's what I mean by they don't mean anything. And then also, it doesn't matter what they're saying, like they've done in the past. They'll call themselves socialists or democratic socialists, and then as soon as they get power, they're communists, or they're Nazis, or they're whatever, what have you. So you have to always keep that in mind, is that the terminology is really just there to exploit you, to confuse you, to gaslight you. So if you're debating a socialist expert, the one thing you never want to do is define terms. And this is one of the first things they'll try to get you to do, is they'll try to get you to tell them what you mean by different things. And the reason they want you to tell them is so they can pick it apart. They want to snipe at it from distance. They want to be able to manipulate your words, manipulate your terms, and spin them on you. So if you're ever in a debate with an expert socialist or a Marxist, whatever you want to call them, you make them define terms. And 90% of the time, they will not want to argue with you anymore. They will back out. They will either immediately try to pull out of it, or they will try to force you into coming up with the definitions. Either through the carrot or the stick, they will try to convince you that, no, you need to give them terms. Do not ever do this. The next thing you need to know, especially when it comes to a Marxist, if you ever say anything and they look super confused, like they have no idea what you said, you just said something you've heard 100 times, or you've seen it a dozen times, or, whatnot. It's something you've learned, something is true, or something that, you've picked up as knowledge, and you bring this thing up and they go, what's that? What are you talking about? Oh, they're lying. You have hit a nail on the head, and they are uncomfortable with that nail. They are uncomfortable with the fact that you've brought up something that they're not ready to discuss. So the first move is going to be to pretend they have no idea what you're talking about. And in fact, a lot of times when you ask them to define terms, they're going to act like, what are you talking about? That's an undefinable thing. Or that's not correct. What they'll do is, and they won't act like it's undefinable, they'll act like the definition that's been given is totally wrong. And then 10 seconds later, they'll be explaining something, and they'll explain exactly what you just said to them. And if you bring that up, the circle begins. Because it's really about gaslighting you to keep you uninformed. The more you know about socialism, the more you understand about Marxism, the less you're going to want it. So the last thing they ever want to do is inform you. The last thing they ever want is you to know what's actually happening. That's why it's all about deflection. That's why it's all about making you spin yourself out. The other thing they will try to do is the euphemism game. And the euphemism game, Bernie plays the euphemism game all the time. He has for decades. It's like, if you mean socialism means I want all of the poor to be fed, then yes, I'm a socialist. Or if by socialism you mean that I think that everyone deserves the right to medical care, then yeah, I'm a socialist. Call them on that immediately, because it's a euphemism. It doesn't mean anything. That's not the definition of anything. And they're trying to avoid definitions. They're trying to avoid terms, like I said before, because those things pin them in. They frame them into a single thought that you yourself can pick apart, because there isn't consistency to it.